The Huntress in action. The dark void of space stretched endlessly around Captain Riley's core. She stood in the cockpit of her sleek black starship, the Vengeance, staring at the glowing red signal on her tracker. Another bounty. Another hunt. She had done this 1,000 times before, and every time she won. Relentless was a legend in the galaxy, an unstoppable huntress. No creature, no warrior, no beast had ever escaped her. She was fast, strong, and ruthless. Her name alone was enough to strike fear in criminals and rebels across the universe. The red signal beeped again. Her target was hiding on planet X-47, a dark, jungle-covered world on the edge of the star system. It was said to be cursed, abandoned, and deadly. That didn't matter to her. She was the deadliest thing in the universe. She pushed the controls forward, and the Vengeance sliced through space like a shadow, heading straight for the planet. As she neared the atmosphere, she tapped her wrist device. Scan for life forms. The screen flickered. The results came back strange. Only one life form detected. The fugitive was alone. No guards, no backup. Nothing. That was unusual. Too easy. Relentless smirked. Pathetic. She landed the ship in a clearing. The jungle around her was thick and dark, with towering trees and vines that stretched like the fingers of a corpse. The air was heavy, filled with strange noises, rustling leaves, distant growls, and something else. Something was watching her. She stepped off her ship, gripping her plasma rifle. Her armor shimmered under the dim red light of the planet's dying sun. Every step she took was silent, careful, deadly. She had hunted in worse conditions before. The fugitive was close. She could feel it. Her tracker led her deeper into the jungle. The trees twisted overhead, their branches curling like claws. The ground was damp, the air thick. The deeper she went, the quieter everything became. Then, a noise, a rustle, a breath. She turned sharply, rifle raised. Nothing. She took a slow breath. Calm. Focus. Stay sharp. Another step forward. And then, boom. A massive explosion rocked the ground behind her. The Vengeance, her ship, her lifeline, was gone. Flames shot into the sky as metal debris scattered in all directions. For the first time in years, fear crawled into her chest. She turned, scanning the jungle, rifle ready. Who did this? No one should have known she was here. A whisper. A shadow moved. Something fast. She aimed, fired. The plasma bolt hit nothing but air. Another shadow, moving from the left. Another whisper. She was not alone. "Come out and fight," she growled. Silence. Then, a sharp pain. Something slashed her shoulder. A deep cut, too fast to see. She gasped, stepping back, raising her rifle. But there was nothing there. Blood dripped down her arm. Her own blood. For the first time in her life, Captain Riley's core was the one being hunted. The predator turns prey. Relentless ran. She didn't flee from fights. She never had. But this was different. Her body moved on pure instinct, dodging through the thick jungle. Her mind screamed at her to process what had happened, but nothing made sense. Her ship was gone. Her enemy was unseen. And for the first time in her life, she was bleeding. The cut on her shoulder burned. Not a normal wound. Something was in her blood now, spreading like fire through her veins. A poison. A parasite. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to move faster. She needed to survive first. Figure it out later. Leaves crunched behind her. Footsteps. Heavy. Controlled. Someone was following her. She skidded to a stop, swinging her plasma rifle up. But her hands were empty. Her weapon was gone. Relentless's heart pounded. When? When did she lose it? Had the enemy taken it? Had she dropped it? How was this happening? A sound came from the shadows. Not a growl. Not a hiss. A whisper. A voice. Speaking in a language she didn't know. She spun around, fists raised. "Who are you?" No answer, just a slow, steady breath. Then, a laugh. A quiet, knowing laugh that sent ice down her spine. She had faced monsters, warlords and assassins across the galaxy. None of them had ever laughed at her. The whispering voice came again. This time, she understood a single word. Run. The jungle erupted. A force slammed into her from behind, sending her flying through the air. She crashed against a tree, her vision exploding with white light. Pain lanced through her ribs. She coughed, tasting blood. Before she could react, something grabbed her by the throat. A hand, a human hand. Her vision refocused, and for the first time, she saw her hunter. A man, a human, tall, muscular, eyes like a storm. His face was half covered in dirt and blood, his expression calm. Too calm. This was her target. This was the fugitive. This was the man she had been hunting. And now he was looking down at her like she was the prey. His grip tightened around her throat, just enough to make breathing difficult. "Not so unstoppable now, are you?" Relentless snarled, swinging her fist at his face. But he was gone. Just gone. She gasped, stumbling forward. How? The jungle was empty. Silent again. He had disappeared. She was alone. Relentless wiped the blood from her lips. Her entire body ached. Her enemy wasn't just dangerous. He was toying with her. And worst of all, he was winning. Trapped like an animal. Relentless woke to the taste of blood. Her head throbbed. Her body ached. She was lying on cold stone. The damp air smelled of metal and earth, not the jungle. Somewhere else. She tried to move, but her arms didn't respond. She looked down. Chains. Heavy, rusted chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles, bolted into the walls. Her heart pounded. She was captured. How? How? The last thing she remembered was the jungle. The human. His hand around her throat. His voice, calm. The way he had vanished like a ghost. And now, she was here. A low, steady hum filled the air. She forced herself to focus. Her surroundings were dimly lit by flickering orange lights. A cavern. The walls were cut smooth, unnatural. Someone had built this place. And she wasn't alone. A figure sat across from her, just beyond the shadows. "You're awake," the voice said. That voice. Her muscles tensed. Him. She didn't need to see his face to know. The fugitive. The human. Relentless yanked at her chains, testing their strength. They didn't budge. "Don't bother," he said. "I built those restraints myself. If they can hold a Xarkan warlord, they can hold you." Her breath came fast, anger and confusion mixing inside her like fire. This wasn't right. No human should be able to outmatch her. She was faster, stronger. She was the greatest hunter in the galaxy. "Who are you?" she hissed. The man leaned forward. The dim light finally revealed his face. Sharp jawline, piercing eyes, scars cutting across his skin like a roadmap of battles won. "Dax Mercer," he said. "The last mistake you'll ever make." Relentless bared her teeth. "You think you've won?" Dax smirked. "I don't think. I know." She lunged forward, putting all her strength into breaking free. And the moment she did, something snapped at her throat. Pain exploded through her body. A shock collar. He had trapped her like an animal. She gasped, the electricity burning through her veins, her body shaking against the stone floor. Dax watched, his face unreadable. "You're used to being the one in control," he said. "The predator. The huntress. But out here, on this planet." He leaned in, his voice a whisper. "You're nothing but prey." Relentless lay on the ground, breathing hard, her body still twitching from the shock. She had underestimated him. She wouldn't make that mistake again. The true face of the enemy. The smell of fire. The distant sound of dripping water. The cold bite of metal against her skin. Relentless opened her eyes. She was still in the cavern, still chained like an animal. But something had changed. She wasn't alone anymore. Across the dimly lit space, a man stood at a small fire. Not just any man. Him. The fugitive. The one who had outmatched her. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her at all. He just stood there, sharpening a blade against a stone. Calm. Methodical. Like she wasn't even a threat. Like she wasn't worth worrying about. Relentless gritted her teeth. He was mocking her. She pulled at her chains again. No give. No use. Still trapped. "You've been staring at me for the last 5 minutes," the man said without looking up. "You gonna say something, or just keep trying to break out?" Relentless ignored the question. Instead, she studied him, her mind calculating. Tall. Strong. Scared. Every movement controlled, efficient. His armor wasn't advanced, but it was worn, like it had survived 100 battles. The way he held the knife, not just a fighter, a survivor. "Who are you?" she finally asked. This time, he looked at her. His gaze was sharp, measuring her. "Dax Mercer," he said, "last human left alive on this rock, and the one who just saved your life." Relentless's eyes narrowed. "Saved," she laughed, short and sharp. "You call this saving? You chained me to a wall." Dax shrugged. "You were about to die. This was the safer option." She didn't buy it. "I don't need saving." Dax smirked. "That's funny, because the way I remember it, you were bleeding out and unconscious when I found you." Relentless tensed. She hated that he was right. But still, why? Why take her prisoner instead of just killing her? Why save her? "What do you want from me?" she asked. Dax exhaled, finally setting his knife down. "I need you to listen," he said, "because you came here hunting the wrong enemy." Relentless frowned. What was he talking about? "You think I'm the fugitive," he continued. "The target. The threat." He leaned forward. The firelight cast shadows across his scared face. "But I'm not the one you should be afraid of." A cold chill ran down Relentless's spine. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected. Not arrogance, not hostility. A warning. "Something is coming," he said, "and if you don't listen, you're going to die. Just like the rest of them." Relentless's pulse quickened. For the first time since she landed on this planet, she started to wonder if she was on the wrong side. The escape plan. The fire crackled. The scent of burning wood mixed with the damp, metallic smell of the cavern. Relentless sat still, watching, waiting, calculating. Dax Mercer, the so-called fugitive, was focused on his gear, checking weapons, securing supplies. He had left her chains alone, as if he wasn't even concerned about her escaping. Big mistake. Her fingers twitched. He was underestimating her. That meant he was getting comfortable. That meant he was getting sloppy. Good. Relentless shifted slightly, testing the weight of her restraints. There was always a weakness. "You keep looking at those chains like you think you're getting out of them." Dax's voice was casual, but his eyes flicked to her like a hunter watching prey. She smirked. "Who says I'm not?" Dax let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You don't get it yet, do you?" He picked up his knife, twirling it between his fingers. "You think this is a prison. You think I'm keeping you here because I don't want you to run." He stepped closer, crouching just out of her reach. "I'm keeping you here because if you run, you die." His words carried weight. Too much certainty. Relentless didn't like it. "Who you think you're trying to scare?" she shot back. "I don't run from fights." Dax tilted his head, considering her for a moment. "You still think I'm your enemy, don't you? You're the one who put me in chains." Dax didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned in. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. That collar would have fried your nervous system the moment you woke up." She went still. That was a bluff. Had to be. Right? Dax stood up again, stepping back. "I've been here a long time, Huntress. I know this place better than anyone." He gestured toward the dark tunnels leading deeper into the cavern. "And I know that something is coming. Something that's killed every other bounty hunter who's come for me. You're just the latest one to walk into its trap." Rylus narrowed her eyes. She didn't believe him. She couldn't. If she started believing, then that meant she had been wrong. That meant she had walked into a war she didn't understand. That meant she wasn't the hunter anymore. She was the bait. Rylus clenched her jaw, her muscles coiling like a spring. Dax Mercer thought she was trapped. He thought she was helpless. He had no idea what she was capable of. She gave him a slow, sharp smile. "Then I guess I better escape before whatever's coming gets here." Dax sighed, shaking his head. "You really don't listen, do you?" But Rylus was already moving. And this time, she wouldn't fail. The real threat. The first sign of danger wasn't the sound. It was the silence. Rylus had been in enough war zones, hunted enough creatures, to know that silence was always worse than noise. Silence meant something was listening, watching, waiting. She froze, still shackled to the cavern wall. Across the fire, Dax Mercer had stopped moving too. For the first time, he looked worried. "It found us," he muttered. Rylus's pulse quickened. "What found us?" Dax didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed a weapon, a sleek old-world human rifle with glowing blue runes carved into its side, and pointed it toward the cavern entrance. Rylus followed his gaze. The tunnel leading outside was pitch black, darker than it should have been. The firelight didn't touch it. Something moved. Something big. A shadow rippled along the ceiling. No footsteps. No breathing. Just movement. A shape formed in the darkness. Not a person. Not a beast. Something worse. Rylus felt it then, an unnatural pull at the edge of her mind. A presence that didn't belong. Her instincts screamed. "You wanted to run," Dax said without looking at her. "Go ahead. But if you do, it'll reach inside your skull and turn you into one of them before you make it 5 steps." The thing in the darkness twitched. A low, chittering sound filled the air, scraping against her nerves like broken glass. Rylus clenched her jaw. What the hell was this? Dax exhaled, gripping his weapon tighter. "You're about to find out why nobody ever comes back from hunting me." The thing in the shadows moved. And then it attacked. A blur of jagged limbs and shifting black mist exploded into the cavern. Dax fired. A burst of glowing energy slammed into the creature's chest, but instead of falling, it screamed. Not a normal scream. A sound that dug into Rylus's head, making her vision blur, her pulse stutter, her breath hitch. The chains around her wrists rattled. No, not just the chains. The whole cavern was shaking. Dax cursed. "Damn it. Get ready." He turned, raising his weapon again. Rylus didn't wait. She moved. She ignored the splitting pain in her skull, focused everything on one goal: getting free. With a sharp twist, she dislocated her wrist and slipped one hand out of the shackles. Pain flared up her arm, but she didn't stop. She didn't have time to stop. Dax was still firing, but the creature wasn't going down. It was changing. The shadows around it swirled, shifting its shape, its limbs elongating, twisting, multiplying. A second mouth opened along its torso, stretching wide in a soundless howl. Rylus ripped her other arm free. "Mercer," she barked. Dax glanced at her, then tossed a knife in one smooth motion. She caught it midair. The shadow thing lunged. Rylus charged. For the first time, she wasn't the hunter. But she wasn't prey either. She was a survivor. And she was about to prove it. The final battle. The cavern walls trembled. The fire sputtered and died, swallowed by the growing darkness. The thing, the nightmare in the shadows, let out a sound that wasn't a roar, wasn't a scream. It was worse, a sound that ate the light, crushed the air, and clawed its way into Rylus's mind. She didn't flinch. She didn't have time to. Her body moved on instinct, dodging left as a jagged limb slashed through the air where her head had been seconds ago. Dax fired again, the blue glow of his rifle lighting up the cavern in flashes. The bullets hit, but the thing didn't stop. "It's adapting," Dax shouted. Relentless didn't need him to tell her. She could see it. The creature's body was changing, learning. The wounds from Dax's shots were already sealing shut. Relentless gripped the knife he had thrown her, its metal warm in her hand. Then we stopped giving it time to adapt. She ran straight at it. Dax cursed behind her. "Oh, you are insane." Maybe. But she wasn't about to die in a cage. The shadow beast lunged, its massive clawed hand reaching for her. Relentless dropped low, sliding beneath it, feeling the air ripple as the claw passed over her head. She twisted at the last second, bringing the knife up, and stabbed it deep into the creature's side. The effect was immediate. The thing let out a distorted, ear-splitting shriek as its body convulsed. Relentless yanked the knife free, black ichor spraying across the cavern floor. Dax took the opening. One shot, straight to the wound she had just made. This time, the thing reacted. It staggered. It bled. And for the first time, it looked afraid. Relentless smirked. "Not so tough when you're the one bleeding, huh?" The creature twisted violently, trying to retreat into the shadows. Dax didn't let it. Neither did she. They attacked together. Relentless was faster, darting in and slashing at every weak spot she could find. Dax was precise, his rifle carving holes in the thing's body with every shot. They didn't let up, didn't give it time to change again. The beast screeched, its body breaking apart, dissolving into darkness. Then, silence. Relentless stood there, breathing hard, black ichor dripping from her knife. Dax exhaled sharply, lowering his rifle. Well, that was fun. She turned to him. That wasn't just a creature, was it? Dax shook his head. No. His expression was grim. That was just the first one. The words settled like cold steel in her gut. Relentless looked down at the dissolving corpse. This thing had hunted her, trapped her, toyed with her. But it wasn't the real threat. The real threat was still out there. She flicked the black blood from her blade and turned to Dax. "Looks like you're not the only one being hunted anymore." For the first time, Dax grinned. "Welcome to the war, Huntress." And just like that, the game had changed.